The big news today, the world ended. I think. Are we still on? There was an eclipse. It happened. The sun and the moon did the thing that everyone's been saying they were going to do for centuries now. The path got totality'd, and now both planets will go back to years of ignoring each other before they inevitably hook up again. Textbook toxic relationship. But not everyone was happy about today's celestial seasonings. For danger lurks.
A Fox News alert, a rare celestial event collides with a policy failure on the ground. The southern border will be directly in the path of totality today when the moon covers the sun for nearly 4 minutes.
We are told that officials are bracing for higher traffic than usual, and that means a real opportunity for smugglers and cartels and migrants to come right in.
Or they could just wait till nighttime. They don't have the eclipse. 4 minutes. I gotta say though, is there nothing Fox can't tie to immigration? This year's cicada infestation provides perfect cover for Venezuelans. Of course, if you combine the dangers of today's eclipse with Friday's seismic activity in the Northeast, well, a more troubling picture emerges.
Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted that the earthquake and Monday's solar eclipse are a sign from God that Americans need to repent.
How do you know? How would you know that is what God meant? Why would God be so obtuse? Why would he do that? Or she, why would she? Or how crazy would it be if God insisted on they, them? But honestly, is this shit really how God works? I must let man know to repent their wickedness. How, Lord? Well, I don't know, dim the lights for like 4 minutes. A very specific path. And God, what else? Give New Jersey a little shake, maybe. Enough to render the buildings to rubble and to bring people to their knees in repentance and atonement? No, just a little like Jersey. Just a little noogie, like, oh, Jersey. The war in Gaza is now 6 months old. I think time for a wellness check. But as the war has grinded on, justice is beginning to seem more like cruelty. But not to worry. America, the shining city on a hill, is on the case with our universal values.
In the great battle for freedom between a rules-based order and one governed by brute force, in this battle, we need to be clear-eyed.
And just to clarify, we are the freedom folks. We're the rules people. We're not the brute force ones. I think we all know who the brute force ones are. In this case, Vladimir. And know that America will call you out when you violate the basic tenets of humanity.
Weaponizing food, using it as a tool, as a weapon in its war against Ukraine, it's unconscionable. Should not happen.
It's unconscionable. Weaponizing food in Ukraine is not kosher, nor halal. Sorry if I'm both sidesing this. Speaking of which, there is a literal famine in Gaza caused by the war. I assume America will also consider this unconscionable.
Absolutely, we're concerned about that. No question about it.
Well, you can't spell unconscionable without concern, or at least part of it, the C-O-N part. You can reuse the C-O. You get the point. How about the free press? Ordinarily, we are strongly in favor of free press.
We also condemn the Russian government's continued targeting and repression of journalists.
You hear that, Russia? We condemn, in no uncertain terms, any repression of a free press. I think you all know what's coming next. More journalists have been killed in Gaza in 6 months than anywhere else in the world, and a new Israeli law says they can ban media outlets they consider a threat.
So as it relates to Al Jazeera specifically, we've seen the reports. If it is true, a move like this is concerning.
Oh, we're concerned again. How about if it's true, we condemn it? And by the way, is it true? Like, it feels like you could probably just call someone and be like, is this true? And if they're like, yeah, it's true, you could be like, that's concerning. Not condemning, but concerning. Well, you know what? Perhaps these are just peripheral issues. What about the bedrock rule of international law? No taking land by force. When Russia does it, we're pretty clear.
The entire world has a stake in making sure that no nation, no aggressor, is allowed to take a neighbor's territory by force. The American people will never waver on our commitment to those values.
Ish. See, this is where Israel's actions get interesting. Because you might say Israel's war is different than Ukraine's. Israel's responding to an attack and a hostage crisis. But in the midst of that, they pulled a little something in the West Bank on March 22nd that might be notable.
As the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken made his latest visit to Israel, the Israeli government announced that it was declaring state land, nearly 2,000 acres of land, in the occupied West Bank.
This latest Israeli appropriation is the largest land transfer since the Oslo Accords were signed in 1993.
1993, and that's not even Gaza, that's the West Bank. So you can't say it has anything to do with defending yourself against Hamas. Let's see if America upholds its rule against taking land.
I haven't seen the specifics of this, but anyone taking steps that makes things more difficult, more challenging this time, it's something that we have a problem with.
You don't know about it. They did it the day you visited. Why do we tiptoe around on eggshells? They slap America in the face, and our response is, well, if anyone slapped us in the face, it'd be concerning, that's for sure. I mean, raising a hand to a delicate body part of the face, if true, the verbal gymnastics that the American government must undertake so as not to offend the delicate sensibilities of a country we provide most of the weapons for is, every time America tells the world that there's something we won't allow, Israel seems to say, challenge accepted. Are they willfully trying to provoke us? Or perhaps they're just reading our principles from right to left. It's over. It's really, to be honest, it's kind of a bar mitzvah joke, but over 30,000 have died in Gaza since the war started. Some of them Hamas soldiers, 13,000 of them children. Our response.
Since the early hours, we've been urging our Israeli counterparts to act with as much precision as they can in their targeting. Our constant efforts to urge the Israelis to be as precise and careful as possible, we can still continue to urge Israel to be more careful and more precise. The need for the Israeli Defense Forces to act with precision. We continue to work with the Israelis to make sure that they are as precise as they can be.
See, they're not listening. Have you tried synonyms for precision?
We continue to stress to our Israeli counterparts that they be as discriminate and careful in their targeting as possible, be as cautious and deliberate and as careful as they can, to be more careful and more deliberate, be very deliberate in the most discreet, deliberate, careful, cautious way possible, the utmost care. And a special burden to be mindful.
To be mindful? What is this, hot yoga? We just, we've seen the bombing and we are urging Netanyahu to be present. What the are we doing here? The subtext of all this is America knows this is wrong, but it apparently doesn't seem to have the courage to say it in a straightforward manner. America and Israel both know that you cannot bomb your way into safety. We learned that lesson in Iraq and Afghanistan. They learned it in southern Lebanon. They laid siege there, occupied the southern area for 20 years. All it did was birth and strengthen Hezbollah. And they're about to do it all over again, and we are letting them. Real friends take the keys, because friends don't let friends bomb that much. And after this recent week, with so much horror, Perhaps America finally finds the need for a new approach with Israel, with more justice and less cruelty.
The U.S. and Israel are closing in on what would be their largest weapons deal since the war in Gaza began.
Well, I don't know about you, but if that's true, I find it concerning.
Let's kick things off with yesterday's solar eclipse, when people across the continent came together to have their wallets stolen while they were distracted by space. Hopefully everyone wore the correct safety glasses so they didn't catch COVID from the sun, but even if you did wear them, you still might have had a solar hangover.
Google Trends report shows some of the eclipse watchers may not have been using proper eye protection. The company says it saw a spike in searches of "My eyes hurt" following the solar eclipse on Monday.
My eyes hurt? That's not even a question. That just sounds like people were complaining to their computer. My eyes hurt, Google. Get some friends, losers. By the way, I hate that Google uses our searches to monitor trends. That's why you got to throw up some fake searches every day. Like, I'll put in "my eyes hurt" plus something random like hockey skates, edible, just to throw it off. But this story does say a lot about the state of our healthcare system. Back in the day, if you had eye pain, you'd call up your family doctor and he'd tell you to smoke more cigarettes. Nowadays, you have to wait 6 weeks to get an appointment with your eye doctor, or you can go online and immediately find out that the eclipse glasses gave you autism. Look, the good news is, for most people, the pain is probably a harmless case of eye strain. You'll be fine, because those glasses were made from the same high-tech advanced material as the birthday crown they give you at Burger King. Is Arizona really using an abortion law from the 1860s? Back then, there wasn't even a test to become a doctor. It was just a gross guy saying, "I love looking at scabs. I want to be a doctor." It's like, and it's not just abortion. We shouldn't be using any Civil War law. At least every 100 years, we should just do a review of all the laws, you know? Guys, we still against murder? All right, great. Moving on. All post offices have mandatory horse ties? No? Scrap that one. Okay. But this is the kind of thing women have been facing ever since Roe v. Wade was killed by the Supreme Court. And while many Republicans would like the whole country to look like Arizona, Donald Trump, the guy who appointed those Supreme Court justices, is now trying to position himself as a moderate on abortion.
Now to the race for the White House. After months of questions, former President Donald Trump today revealing his position on abortion, declining to call for a national ban, saying he would leave it up to the states.
The states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people.
Elsewhere in the video, Trump expressed support for IVF and abortion exceptions for rape, incest, and when the life of the mother is at risk.
I strongly support the availability of IVF for couples who are trying to have a precious baby.
Did he just say precious baby sarcastically? Congrats on your bundle of joy. Also, not the main point here, but that's more spray tan than usual, right? Your first thought when you see someone's face should never be, is it cake? But more importantly, yes, Donald Trump now says that states should choose their own abortion laws. Although I don't know why that's considered a moderate position. As a reasonable man, I think only some women should be forced to give birth against their will, depending on which state they live in. It's called common sense. Honestly, I'm just shocked Trump came out in support of IVF. I expected him to be like, if your loser husband can't get it done, give me a call. I'll be in and out 2 minutes. And by the way, Trump isn't just trying to position himself as a moderate on abortion. He also wants to portray the Democrats as the real extremists.
It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month, and even execution after birth. And that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that.
Come on, dude. Democrats don't execute babies after birth. They send them to Hillary so she can harvest their organs. Seriously, that's such an obvious lie. Nobody wants to execute babies. Now, when they're 3 or 4 and they're talking all day in a goddamn Peppa Pig accent, well, then you might find some execution support. But, of course, you might be wondering, has this always been Donald Trump's position on abortion? Well, in a way it has, in that Donald Trump has had every position on abortion.
I'm very pro-choice. I am pro-choice in every respect.
Trump says he has since changed his thinking and is now, quote, 100% pro-life.
I am pro-life.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
Within 3 hours, Trump did a 180. If abortion were illegal, his campaign wrote, the doctor or any other person performing this illegal act upon a woman would be held legally responsible, not the woman.
It will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination. It could be state or it could be federal. I don't frankly care. We're also seeking passage of the 20-week abortion bill.
The number of weeks now, people are agreeing on 15. And I'm thinking in terms of that.
I know you're opposed to abortion.
Right. I'm pro-choice.
You're pro-choice or pro-life?
I'm pro-life. I'm sorry.
Pro-life.
I mean, and people claim Biden has memory issues. Trump's like, remind me what my principled stand is on one of the biggest issues in this country. This guy has truly been all over the place on abortion. I feel like his positions change based on which of his kids he saw last, you know? Ivanka, pro-life. Eric and Don, mandatory abortion. Now,
Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal recently voiced support for Sotomayor stepping down, saying, we should learn a lesson, and it's not like there's any mystery here about what the lesson should be.
Yeah, there sure isn't. Obviously, the lesson is RBG should have retired, or if they would have listened to me, turned her into some immortal robo-judge. But for some reason, neither of those things happened. And now Democrats are trying to avoid that mistake with Sotomayor, but it's a tricky situation. Sotomayor is 69 years old, which by definition is nice, right? And it's a little ironic that Democrats are trying to push her out at the exact same time they're trying to elect a president who can tuck his testicles into his sock. But on the other hand, it's just smart politics. And I know people are saying this isn't fair to Sotomayor, but you gotta have a little perspective. It's not like they're gonna melt her down to make the new justice. She gets to retire. She's gonna make money. She's gonna sit by the pool. She won't have to spend her days pretending to like her coworkers anymore. She can spend them pretending to like her family. And I don't care if she retires or not. I just hate that we have to go through this every few years. And like everything else in America, this is the founding fathers' fault. They decided, for some reason, that the Supreme Court justices get lifetime appointments, and now they're basically the forever chemicals of democracy, and it's not great for the rest of the country. Yeah. It's not great for the rest of the country, and it's certainly not dignified for the justices. Everyone's first thought when you die shouldn't be, yes, a job opening. All right, here's my proposal. If they're going to get to stay in the court for their entire lives, at a minimum, the justices should be required to lead more dangerous lives, you know? You can stay on the court as long as you want, but you have to do an annual running of the bulls, right? Earlier this week, former President Trump announced that after getting Roe v. Wade overturned, he's happy with how everything has worked out. Because from now on, each state will make its own rules. Like, you know how sometimes the speed limit is 45 miles an hour, and then down the road it's 35 miles an hour? Well, that's how human rights are going to work now. So what could go wrong? But then Arizona decided that its law would be a nearly complete abortion ban that was first enacted during the Civil War. And even pro-life Republicans started freaking out.
Tonight, some Republicans across the country are rhetorically trying to distance themselves from Arizona's Supreme Court ruling that upholds a near total abortion ban.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina, called it an asinine ruling.
And Republican Congressman Juan Ciscomani calling the decision a disaster for women and providers.
Carrie Lake locked in one of the most high-profile races in the country.
She released a statement which reads, and I quote, "I oppose today's ruling, and I am calling on Katie Hobbs and the state legislature to come up with an immediate common sense solution that Arizonans can support."
Yeah. I mean, this anti-abortion law is being received as well as O.J. Simpson at the pearly gates. see you on here. Even far-right Republican Kari Lake hates it. And that can't just be because she's in a tight Senate race. Surely she's always hated it, right?
Kari Lake previously said this about the 1864 law less than 2 years ago.
I'm incredibly thrilled that we are going to have a great law that's already on the books. I believe it's ARS 133603.
Wow. Kari Lake didn't just support this bill, she knew its bill number by heart. I believe it's ARS 133603. She said that like when a guy tries to play it cool about how much he's into Dune, you know? Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that movie. I believe that's the one where Paul Atreides wields the power of the Bene Gesserit to fulfill the prophecy of the Lisan-Galgaid. I think that's the one. Yeah, they changed it from the books. I mean, look, have you ever loved a law so much that you memorized it? Even the person who wrote the law in 1864 would be like, "My lady, thou art a weirdo," or however they talked back then. I'm just saying, the way she rattled it off, 133603. I'm pretty sure if you find Kari Lake's iPhone, you'll be able to unlock it. But hey, that's fine. If even Republicans agree that this abortion ban is too extreme, then Arizona Democrats can just propose a bill to reverse the old law, and I'm sure the GOP will get on board. Check it out.
GOP lawmakers today block a vote to reverse the landmark ruling from the state Supreme Court yesterday, reinstating a pre-statehood near-total ban on abortion.
Well, that's weird. I mean, you guys say you don't want an insane abortion ban, but then you voted to keep it. It's almost like you're just totally full of shit. I mean, listen. If Arizona women are going to be forced to live under this law from 1864, then all of Arizona's lawmakers should be forced to get their health care from 1864 standards, too. Yeah, you've got back pain? Put some leeches on it. Migraine? More leeches. Feeling depressed? You can see a therapist. Your therapist is a leech, okay? Clearly, this law has completely thrown Republicans for a loop. They hate the law. They love the law. They don't know what to do. And this is all great news, actually, for President Biden. A perfect opportunity to hammer the Republicans in a critical swing state for their confusion and their hypocrisy. Dude, you got a wide open net, my man, all right? All you need to do is just tap the ball in.
President Biden was asked today what his message is to Arizonans.
Elect me. I'm in the 20th century, 21st century.
You blew it! Okay. Hey, Republicans think we're in 1864. The president thinks we're in the 20th century. If we're playing by the Price is Right rules, Biden was closest without going over. Right? Yeah. Now, luckily, Arizona voters will likely vote on a ballot initiative in November that will let them decide for themselves if they want abortion to be legal. And for anyone in Arizona who might need an abortion before then, Republicans want you to know, hey, everything's fine.
I mean, this is tricky business. How does this play out?
It hurts Trump for a few days, and then people start to realize this is not the worst thing in the world. If you had to travel to another state to get an abortion, it's not the worst thing in the world. Hopefully, this is a very rare occurrence in your life. Once in your life, maybe you would do it. Buying a bus ticket to go somewhere to get it is not the worst thing in the world.
It's Jim. Hey, it's true. It's technically can't be the worst thing in the world as long as that toupee exists. But what is wrong with you guys? It's not the worst thing in the world to take a bus to a different state. It's also not the worst thing in the world to just let women have rights, you know? I would say it's actually significantly nicer than going on a bus, you know? It doesn't cost you anything. There's never a circumstance where someone takes the shit so bad they need to pull over and wait for a second bus to pick everybody up. And by the way, I love that he made this entirely the woman's problem. Where's the father in this scenario? He can't give her a ride? He's just standing at the bus station waving like, bye, have a nice abortion, try to pick up some food on the way home.